Hi, this is Duke Ralston from the Reaper's Digest. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I wanted to ask you to buy the Reaper's Digest a cup of coffee. Just go to Ko-fi.com/tennessemacabre and send us a tip. Thank you again.
Welcome to a night.
Welcome to the Reaper's Digest podcast, the podcast where we dissect the best and the worst of horror, fantasy, and science fiction. I'm Blake Earl.
And I'm Duke Ralston.
And we are here live together in the same room.
That's right. This is a pretty neat event because we're at the Full Moon Nashville Horror and Tattoo Fest. And we're staying at the lovely Moon Shack, which is an Airbnb in Nashville near the airport, having a high time.
Yeah, drinking Drogo coffee.
A good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, drinking some Drogo coffee, man.
Yeah. So we're continuing our series on Dracula today.
Yes.
The most adapted character in all of fiction.
Yes. And
so we want to talk about some of the movies that maybe are a little less by the book, as it were.
They're off the beaten path in Transylvania.
Yeah, off the Borgo Pass, as it were.
Yes.
So what do you want to talk about first?
Well, I think the first ones we're going to talk about, and I like to group these together, Dracula AD 1972 and the Satanic Rites of Dracula. And they're kind of a series. They're interconnected. Mm-hmm. And what Hammer did was they decided to bring Dracula from the Gothic period into modern swinging London.
Yeah, so these are both Hammer films.
Both Hammer films.
Put out in the 70s.
Put out in, I think, 70 and 72.
Yeah.
If I'm correct. AD 1972 is it's a group of kids, and they go into there's one of them who is sort of a leader who is a cultist, mm-hmm. and they don't realize how much of a cultist he is. They think it's all just kind of fun and games, and he lures them into an abandoned churchyard for a ceremony, a ritual. And what they don't realize is that he's actually reviving Dracula. He revives Dracula, who immediately drains one of the chicks, mm-hmm. turns the cultist into a vampire, which was his payoff for all this, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Scotland Yard winds up recruiting the 7th great-great-grandson of Abraham von Helsing.
Okay.
Who is also played by Peter Cushing. And so Peter Cushing pursues the vampires and destroys them. It also has a neat bridge at the beginning. It is the original Van Helsing and Dracula in this life and death battle. And Van Helsing is killed, but before he does, he throws Dracula onto a broken carriage wheel and he's impaled on the spokes. So they both die. Why they didn't use an end scene from one of the other 5 movies that Hammer did that had Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and Dracula and Van Helsing, I don't know. But it's a really cool bridge scene.
It is a cool bridge scene.
Yes, it is. One of the most photographed, I think, of all Dracula deaths, and it's not even in a movie.
Yeah, it's just the opening to this one.
Just kind of to bridge it from the Victorian era to the modern times.
Yeah.
Now, Satanic Rites of Dracula, in my opinion, and I group these together, is even groovier. Mm-hmm. Because what happens in the Satanic Rites of Dracula is that you have kind of an espionage, a British secret agent type movie, real popular. Bond was at the height of its popularity. So you've got this British secret agency that's taking on Dracula. They go get the detective from Scotland Yard that was in AD 1972 who says, oh, we need to get Van Helsing and his granddaughter.
Yeah.
And so they bring him into it. And Dracula is not content with merely running around London, biting the necks of luscious young things. I almost said that right.
Almost.
Of luscious young things. No, he's developing a special batch of the bubonic plague to destroy the entire planet. And so he becomes like Dr. No and Dracula. So you have all this going on, and Hammer's also trying to capitalize on, how shall we put it? Hammer got kinky.
Yeah, this is definitely post-code.
Yeah. Post-code. A lot of nudity in this flick. A lot of full frontal nudity.
Yeah, which is, if you've never seen it, the first fully frontal nude scene in the movie is a woman being covered in rooster blood.
Yes.
Which is a shocking visual, even for someone as jaded to horror as I am.
Yes, it's still a shocker. And one of the things I like about it is they have these scenes of ritualized sacrifice with nude women, fully nude women. And they actually poke a little bit of fun at it, and they talk about a group of men that go around to have these rituals for, they kind of poke fun at the whole idea, which is exactly what Hammer's doing. But really, in my opinion, and a lot of people are not going to be happy with this statement, but these are my two favorite Hammer Dracula movies.
Really?
Yeah. This is what I think of when I think of Hammer and Dracula.
Even more than horror of Dracula.
Even more than horror of Dracula.
Really?
If I am going to watch, and I like horror. I like the horror of Dracula. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There's not a Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee Dracula movie that I don't like. Okay? But if I am going to watch an original, by the book, old school Dracula, it's either going to be the 1931 version or the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah. Which is much more by the book than any that had come before it.
Much more than any that had come before. So, but for me, Hammers represents 1960s, 1970s, a little bit on the seedy side, lots of big busted women, and often white nude.
Yeah.
And so, AD 1972 and Satanic Rites, that's kind of my Hammer Dracula picks.
It's interesting that we go all the way back to Nosferatu in Satanic Rites of Dracula, in a way, because Nosferatu is so obsessed with the idea of the plague bringer.
Yes.
And Satanic Rites of Dracula goes back to the idea of the vampire as plague bringer.
It's a plague bringer, yes. It does. And you will see this, of course, later on with, I started to say Steven Spielberg. I don't know why I come up with that. But
I would watch a Steven Spielberg
I'll
Dracula.
watch a Steven Spielberg back. But with Salem's Lot, a Stephen King. So you'll see that same thing, the idea of a plague bringer. And Satanic Rites takes it in a very literal direction.
Yeah, very literal.
Very literal.
It's interesting because it's such a mixing of genres, and Hammer, as they went on, got into this genre mixing. Of course, famously, the last one is the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
Seven Golden Vampires, yes.
Which is a kung fu flick.
It is a kung fu
with
flick.
vampires.
And I've watched it once or twice. Yeah, I actually quite enjoy it. I don't think of it as, I think of it as more of a martial arts movie with a vampire than I do with the Dracula movie. But it's still good. And these late Hammer flicks, they're mixing genres. And I was talking last night, we hosted it last night on the Vortex. And I love the opening of the Satanic Rites of Dracula because you've got this kind of this gothic villain, and his shadow is juxtaposed over Trafalgar Square in 1972 London with all the traffic and all the and I think about the line, what is it? I can't wait to go to your London with the teeming with life.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a visual representation of that life.
Yeah, we could talk a lot about that opening sequence, the shadow growing in London.
Yes.
I think it's brilliant.
I do too.
I think it's brilliant because that shadow over modernity is really the point of Dracula.
Absolutely.
I think in a way, Satanic Rites of Dracula and Dracula 1972, 1972, get to the point of the character more
Yes.
than some of the older ones.
Yes, they do. You see it. You know, one of my problems with the 1931 Dracula, and I love the movie, but Dracula is kind of romanticized.
A little bit.
And even to some extent, even though it's played by Christopher Lee's Harder Edge, the horror of Dracula still kind of follows that. But by this one, you see Dracula as a real threat.
Mm-hmm.
And Christopher Lee played that role much better. He was a much more threatening Dracula than Bela Lugosi. He also represents a threat to modernity because he's going to destroy the world.
Yeah.
And one thing I did want to mention in 1972 that I don't think I brought out, AD 1972, there's a lot of pop culture in this movie. So you kind of got the swinging London scene. You've got some really cool music. You've got a dance party in the middle of London. These people have found a young person that let them into the house. The parents didn't know they were there, and the parents come home, you know, and they've got all these hippies dancing in the middle of the floor. So there's kind of that hippie counterculture going on, but they just take it a little too far.
Yeah.
You know,
Just a little bit too far. It reminds me of a little bit of the hippies in I Drink Your Blood.
Yes. Yes.
You know, which is a famous late 60s, early 70s shocker.
Yeah. Most of these kids are just kids hunting a good time, but you had one bad apple who was actually into the occult and actually summoned the Prince of Darkness. It happens.
It happens all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've been, you know, hanging out and someone's like, let's summon the Dark Lord. And I'm like,
maybe
all
not.
right.
Maybe not. You know.
Are we out of beer yet? I guess so.
It is Saturday night. But these are, like I said, these are my two favorite Hammer horror pictures, or Hammer horror Dracula pictures.
Yeah.
And,
What are your two favorite Hammer horror pictures?
well, I love the 1958 Mummy. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorites. I think Satanic Rites of Dracula is probably in the top three.
Right.
You know,
It's really good.
it is really good. It is really good. I'm not a huge fan of their Frankenstein movies, and ironically, I think their Frankenstein movies got the point better than the Universal Frankenstein movies, because Frankenstein in Hammer
Mm-hmm.
is not the villain. Dr. Frankenstein is. And they
Yeah.
really capitalize on that. And I think that they get the point. But Boris Karloff ruined me at a young age. And when I think of Frankenstein, that's what I think of.
Yeah.
So I
That
would say
iconic makeup.
the iconic makeup, the Jack Pierce makeup, that's what I think of. But that's a topic for another day. Let's get back to Dracula.
Back to Dracula. Sorry, I was just curious.
Yeah, the Mummy. I'm a fiend for Mummy movies.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, so I love Christopher Lee as the Mummy. I like some of the other Hammer Mummy movies too, but that's my favorite.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other offshoots of Dracula,
Okay.
because he's just been adapted so much. And what do you think is his staying power?
His staying power. I think Dracula speaks to sexuality.
Okay.
More than anything else, Dracula speaks to sexuality, repressed sexuality. And so I feel like that is why he is so popular in the culture and remains so popular.
So, something that reminds me of
Yeah,
is Little Red Riding Hood.
yeah,
You know, Little Red Riding Hood is, of course, story of a little girl goes to grandma's place. She gets accosted by a wolf in the woods who tricks her.
Yep.
This idea of the trickster wolf, right?
Yep.
He's a sexual predator.
He's a sexual predator.
Dracula, when he's feeding on Lucy in Bram Stoker's Dracula, takes the form of the wolf.
Yes.
You know, and I don't think that's accidental.
I don't either.
You know, the wolf has often been associated with sexual predation.
And often, werewolves are often associated with vampires.
Very much so.
Yeah.
In fact, in a lot of folklore, a dead werewolf becomes a vampire.
Yes.
You know, that's true in the Germanic cultures. Their werewolves are a little more fun.
Yeah.
Actually, in Bavaria, you know what werewolves do?
What?
Drink your beer.
Oh,
That's
wow.
why they're to be feared.
That is pretty horrible.
They come to town and drink all the beer up. But
the Bavarians have their priorities in order.
They do. Pretzels, beer, sausage. But I think this idea of sexual predation is definitely a big part of it.
Right.
You know, especially the taboo nature of sexual predation.
And, you know, herein lies, you know, and this is a scene we'll talk about later, but is it sexual predation? And in some cases in the Dracula movies it is, clearly is. There's some people that are clearly victims. Or is the woman he's preying on, does she want to be preyed on? Does Lucy want to be bitten?
I think Lucy wants to be bitten, but doesn't.
I want to bite Winona Ryder.
Yeah. I think we all do. There's yeah. We've got nothing to say about that. But I think Lucy especially doesn't realize the ramifications.
No, and that's very true. That's very true.
So it's the idea of the taking of innocence and the real horror for, especially in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the real horror is in the thought that the innocent might like it.
Yes. That's kind of what I was going at. I mean, you know, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. Let's talk about some theme and variation, because you get some really neat theme and variation on the whole Dracula story in the 70s. And the first movie I think that we're going to talk about is Blackula.
Gotta love Blackula.
You gotta love Blackula. It combines some of the best soul music you've ever listened to.
It is a killer soundtrack.
And it's a blaxploitation film. And the theme is a little bit different because Dracula has, Mama Walde and his wife, the princess, have come to Dracula and are talking with him about stopping the slave trade. And Dracula wants Mama Walde's wife and just quite frankly says it would be an honor for her to be a slave in his service. And of course Mama Walde is a little offended at this, and a fight ensues, and so Dracula bites him and infects him, entombs him alive, or entombs him undead, and puts his wife in the tomb to die with him. Really brutal. So you've got the sexual predation, but you've also got racial victimization here.
Yeah.
And these two interior designers buy an entire consignment from Dracula's estate and open it up. One of them gets cut uncrating it, and the blood drips onto Mama Walde and revives him. And he, of course, proceeds to devour both of them.
Yeah.
Turning them into vampires.
As you do.
Yeah, you got to have a snack after 400 years. And then steps out into L.A. in the 1970s. He is picked up on by a police detective. Well, actually, he's a forensic pathologist. And who begins to realize that something is wrong. In the meantime, Mama Walday has discovered his princess reincarnated, who is the police detective's or the coroner's sister-in-law. So he begins courting her, and there's a scene where they're in a nightclub and he walks in. He's got his cape. He's immaculately dressed in this cape, and he's got this deep Shakespearean voice, you know. And this guy walks up to the table and says, "Man, where'd he get that cape? I need a cape." You know? But again, they run him to ground, and rather than kill Dracula, he takes his own life, which I think is an important statement. They killed him. He turns the sister-in-law into a vampire, and they stake her. But rather than the police getting Mama Walday, when he sees that his princess has been staked, he walks out into the sunlight.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's a very different take on the vampire at the end there.
Yes.
Like, he's a predator, but he's also the hero.
He's also the hero. He's still an African prince.
Yeah. And he's a very strong character.
Yes.
You're obviously meant to root for him.
Yes.
You know, especially with the beginning.
Yes.
As it is.
Yes. Absolutely.
You know?
It's not his fault. He's a vampire. And he is, you know, that whole idea, you know, this is a black man who determines his own fate rather than allowing the police to determine it for him.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the statement at the end there.
Yeah.
Even though the hero is a black cop, Mama Walday is still the hero.
Yeah. You know, and just the music in that in general is incredible.
Yes.
The cinematography is really good. The opening sequence, the animation,
the blood dot vampire
Yeah.
bat. Yeah, the Hughes Corporation did some of the songs for the soundtrack.
Yeah.
A really good soundtrack. If you haven't heard it, if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. If you haven't heard the soundtrack, you need to listen to it. Maybe purchase it. It's a great music.
But I think that Blackula sort of, it marks an interesting turning point.
Yes.
Because now we're starting to see the vampire as the hero.
Yes.
As a sympathetic, tragic character.
Yes.
Which you will see play out over and over and over again. Eventually culminating in, like, Twilight and things like that. You know?
And it's worth mentioning that this was the height of the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
So things that would have been repressed 20 years earlier, it's okay to do it, you know, to be very public and open about it.
Yeah.
So the vampire becomes a much more acceptable figure.
Yeah. And this was before vampirism became the analogy for addicts.
Yes.
You know, so this was just, you know, the swinging 70s.
Yep.
And you get to be a vampire and live forever and
Yes.
dress cool.
Swing forever, dress cool, and party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that turning point. I can't think of another vampire that is as sympathetic.
Yeah. I can't either until you get into, you know, like Twilight and Buffy and some of that.
Yeah.
You get much more sympathetic vampires.
Yeah. Well, even in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is pretty by the book, they do still put in his backstory at the beginning.
Yes, yes, and you understand that he is a very sympathetic character.
Yeah.
Let's get to him at the end.
I'm sorry, I keep going back to that
I do
movie.
too. It's one of my favorite movies. There's another couple of vampire movies that I want to talk about. I want to touch on briefly. Not so much. I'm not going to delve into the plot on these movies. I just want to talk about them because it is an attempt to make an American vampire, which I think is cool. It's Count Yorga.
Oh, okay.
So you kind of retain the count, the aristocratic title, but he's clearly American.
Mm-hmm.
No accent,
No accent.
You know,
not other than that way.
Not yeah. You know, and he is a little bit. He comes off, you know, in his interactions with some of the people in the flick when they don't know he's a vampire. He comes off as a well-to-do American gentleman, and I think that is kind of a neat variation. Now the plots are very predictable. You know, they're vampire movie. But one of the things I did like when Count Yorga kills somebody, it's not this thing where he sort of hypnotizes them and they lean their neck over and he bites them on the neck. He comes running down the hallway and jumps them.
Yeah.
And it's very dramatic, you know. And they do the makeup very well. He's very pale-faced, you know. It's a good flick.
Yeah. You know, we'll get into it later when we talk about more modern takes on the vampire.
Yeah.
Or on Dracula. But have you seen Dario Argento's Dracula?
Yes.
Terrible.
Yes.
Terrible. But a couple notable things in there.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the vampire continues to turn into bugs.
Yeah.
Because that insect-like otherness is something that had been missing from Dracula movies for a while.
Yes.
Something you see in Christopher Lee to take it back to Satanic Rites Dracula.
Right.
The first time you see Christopher Lee's Dracula in Satanic Rites, he's preying on, I guess she's the executive assistant.
Yeah, the office assistant. Yeah.
He's preying on her, and there's just this nothing behind his eyes.
Yeah,
that is,
it's just so there's no lust. There's no He's just deep.
Yeah, he's
just
hungry.
It's a steak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even a particularly good one. He's not savoring it.
No.
It's the way a lion takes a kill.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's what's so chilling about the Hammer movies, as opposed to some of the later ones where Dracula's conflicted or, you know.
Yeah, Christopher Lee there's a very hard edge there. That was a killer Dracula.
Yeah.
There was nothing sympathetic there. Now you look at Frank Langella did a Dracula in 1978. Very much a sexual predator type. You know, very conflicted. A lot of sympathy for Frank Langella, particularly the females in the audience. You know, Christopher Lee's different. Yeah. And I think, to me. Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here, and people may not like this stuff. I can't see a vampire being good. I can watch the stories, I can appreciate the stories, but to me, a vampire ultimately, that's like a cow looking. Yeah, I like you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it doesn't work.
It reminds me of there's a Defiance, Ohio song where speaking from the perspective of the animals we raise for food, and it's called Death and Hatred to Mankind.
Yes, exactly.
You know, because we are their prey.
We are their prey. And no matter what you do at the end of every vampire story, we are their prey.
Yeah. So that makes it really strange when you see, you know, the sympathetic vampire.
Yes.
Now, Blackula makes sense to me because that is taking on a supernatural power and reclaiming it.
Yes.
You know?
He was a good man victimized by Dracula.
Victimized by the white.
Yes.
Literal
white aristocracy.
Yeah. And he's victimized, and he becomes powerful. And once he realizes he's been a little bit corrupted by that power, he destroys himself.
He destroys himself. Yes.
So that's where we start to see the sympathetic vampire. Yeah. But I think it runs amok a little bit.
I think it does too.
You know, you take the teeth out of it, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't, no matter how much you like Blackula, you don't want to sit down at the dinner table.
No. Absolutely
and
not.
when you start to look at some of the more modern adaptations, you do.
Yeah.
And I don't think that works.
I don't think so either. I think it's a watering down of the character.
Yes.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, which can we finally get into?
Let's get into this. It's time. We keep going back. It's time.
Bram Stoker's Dracula follows the plot of the novel very closely.
Yes.
With the notable addition of a prologue.
Yes.
In which Dracula is fighting the Turks.
The Turks, yes.
Yeah. And his wife thinks he has died on the battlefield and throws herself off the balcony.
Can we take a moment to talk about the prologue before we go any further?
Absolutely.
That prologue is pretty accurate historically.
Yes.
With some exceptions. And I have, Bram Stoker based Dracula on Prince Vlad Tepes.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Bathory.
Yeah.
Of the two, Elizabeth Bathory was probably the worst.
Yeah.
Seppish was pretty bad,
yeah.
According to the Germans, who were his enemies. It's fair to say, I've never read any other account of Dracula, but I've often wondered because he kind of turned on the Germans, and all the accounts of the atrocities come from the Germans.
Well,
I don't know.
They don't all come from the Germans. A lot of them came from Vlad himself.
Oh.
He was putting out, with a printing press, propaganda about how evil he was, so that nobody
the Turks
would want to invade.
I didn't realize that. Okay. So, either way, we have the same problem. Was the historical real Vlad Tepes as bad as what he's perceived? Probably was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have wondered about it.
He was probably as brutal as any other leader at the time.
Right. But according to the histories I have read, his wife Elizabeth actually committed suicide, but she committed suicide because it was an arranged marriage, and she realized how horrible her husband was.
Mm-hmm.
So, but other than that prologue is very accurate historically.
Yeah. Now the prologue sets up sympathy for Dracula.
Yes.
He stabs a cross and it bleeds, and then he screams. Interesting side fact, it is rumored that that's actually Lux Interior screaming.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He knew some of the people making the movie.
Yeah.
They were friends.
Yeah.
So if you listen to it, that's Lux Interior screaming.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. From the Cramps. If you don't know that, I don't know what to do with you.
Yeah. Look it up, listen to it on YouTube.
Yeah.
You'll be better for it.
Yeah. But, so he sets up this sort of dichotomy, like, yes, he's a brutal killer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And he has denied God, and he has struck out against the cross, and
yes.
He's brutal, but he's also very sympathetic.
He loved Elizabeth.
Yeah, and he is looking for her.
Yes.
Now, I don't know about, the more I think about this version, I like it. It's visually stunning.
Yes.
Visually stunning.
Best costuming I think I have ever seen. Richest costuming, richest set design.
Yeah, his armor at the beginning that looks like kind of like muscle fiber.
Yes.
It's really cool.
Yeah. The dresses that they have Winona Ryder in.
Yeah.
The costuming they have Dracula wearing.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman. It's all just impeccable.
Hey, Gary Oldman plays a fantastic Count Dracula.
He does play a fantastic Count Dracula.
I don't know if he plays the monster Dracula that well.
No.
But he plays the Count well.
And, when I heard that, I actually went and saw this in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that Gary Oldman was going to be playing the part. And I'm like, are you serious? And then I saw it, and it was just
yeah, he really melts into the role.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the Spider-Man Peter Parker problem or the Batman Bruce Wayne problem. when you're casting this actor, you're casting two different parts.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
One of them has to be the suave man about town. The other one has to be this cold-blooded monster.
Right.
Now, I would say that this is my favorite visual. Plot-wise, it's the closest to the book.
Yes.
But I think it misses the mark a little. In that, they set up so much. I mean, the tagline for the film was "Love Never Dies."
Right.
I don't think Dracula, in the book, as a character, shouldn't have so much put onto romantic energy.
I agree.
You know, I think that
we get to the point where Dracula's a good guy.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was trying to get to. Yeah,
and Dracula's not a good guy.
No.
He hunts us.
Once again, death and hatred of mankind.
And I think that was, I think that made it a good story.
Mm-hmm.
May have made it a more relatable story for our time. You could not have done that story. Bram Stoker, I don't think, could have written it that way.
No,
and it worked
I
in
don't
the
think so.
Victorian period. Again, this works only because of the sexual revolution that preceded it.
Yeah.
But
I don't think it'd work now.
I don't think it would.
Yeah. I mean, if you updated Dracula to the modern era,
Uh-huh.
to, what is it, 2022,
Yeah.
you couldn't have that romantic entanglement
No.
like that.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make sense.
No.
You know, how would you adapt Dracula now?
You know, I appreciate Anne Rice.
Mm-hmm.
Anne Rice does some neat things, not with Dracula per se, but with vampirism.
Yeah.
She kind of walks the line where you have some sympathy for the vampires, but they're still evil.
Mm-hmm.
She brings in the elements of homosexuality, lesbianism, and things that were not included so much in the original Dracula that need
were
to be
hinted at.
but she includes them. So I think that there should be an element of that. You know, I would wonder how does Dracula, I would like to see more development Renfield.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to do more with Renfield. I would want to do more with Jonathan.
Really?
Jonathan can be kind of a one-dimensional character.
And he's almost a plot device in a lot of these movies.
He's almost a plot device. So I would like to see more development. I'd really like to see more development with Renfield. What did Renfield think he was getting out of it? Was Renfield a jilted lover?
Could be.
I mean
that's an interesting angle, actually.
Yeah, and that would be an angle that I would look at, and just more of perhaps a bisexual Jack Dracula.
I think if I were adapted,
Uh-huh.
I would go much more towards Nosferatu.
Yeah.
I would focus heavily on the plague bringer stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I like Dracula surrounded by the rats and the
Yes.
plague rats.
Yes.
I like the alienness of Nosferatu.
Yes.
You know, so that's where I would focus, I think.
And in all fairness, I think the Nosferatu image of Dracula is much closer to what Bram Stoker was writing about
Mm-hmm.
than any of the other images of Dracula that we see.
Yeah. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, you get a little nod to Nosferatu with the shadow.
Yes. Yes.
Which, fantastic use of CGI.
You get it's a nod to Nosferatu, also a nod to White Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
They drew a lot of White Zombie,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually a better film technically than the 1931 Dracula.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you get a lot. There's just a lot going on in this film that's really cool. I love, Winona Ryder was a huge actress, and this was kind of the height of her fame.
And she kills him.
And she kills him. Best Lucy ever. Best Mina ever. The girl that played Lucy, I thought, did a really bang-up job, because Lucy can really just be set dressing.
Yeah.
But in this show, Lucy was not. Lucy, you understand Lucy, and you feel for Lucy, and Lucy's kind of flirting at the edge of her sexuality, and she really pushes the envelope with Dracula.
Yeah. And
because
reaps too much.
Yeah, reaps too much, because Van Helsing says Lucy's not a victim. She's a wanted follower. Yeah, she's the devil's whore. Yeah.
Which is quite the claim.
Yeah. And Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins is probably the best Van Helsing we ever got.
Yeah. Because, okay, Anthony Hopkins, Van Helsing, is not just a doctor. He's a damn wizard.
Oh, yeah.
This is Gandalf in Victorian attire. Yeah.
So, I mean, he's doing the blood transfusions. He's doing the whole nine from the book, which, at the time was cutting-edge technology.
Yes. So what you've got, and this is kind of an interesting aside, you've got Van Helsing, who is kind of the modern interpretation of a wizard. Mm-hmm. He is a scientist.
Yeah.
But he also is studying things that most scientists don't study: transcendental meditation, yoga, and there's that scene where he just disappears. And then you've got, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the medieval dark sorcerer Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of there is a conflict between the two of them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of neat too.
Oh, yeah. They really square off as enemies. There's that great scene where Van Helsing puts the cross in Dracula's face, and he's in like this bat form.
Yeah. And
he stomps the cross, bursts into flame.
Yes.
And he says, "Where's your God now?"
Yes.
That was chilling.
That was chilling. And then there's a scene where one of them says, "It sounds like you admire him, Doctor." And he says, "Yeah, in life there was much to admire. That's greater than need to destroy him." I mean, that's just really a classic scene.
Yeah, and that Van Helsing Dracula dichotomy is something you see played out in horror over and over and over.
Yes.
You need
they're archetypes.
Yeah.
They're archetypes. And I think a lot of times people who make Dracula movies don't understand that, and you see it, but Bram Stoker's Dracula, they understood it.
Yeah. I mean, and you see it coming all the way up into from the early, from the book, from the 1800s all the way into, like, say, Loomis and Michael Myers.
Yeah.
That's just Dracula and Van Helsing.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of a basic premise of horror movies.
Yeah.
And you see it,
it's a building block that gets established there.
Yeah. And you see it, and I like to think of it with Edward Van Sloan. You see Edward Van Sloan playing that Van Helsing character, of course, in Dracula, but he also plays it in Frankenstein, where he gets killed.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you see it again in The Mummy.
Yeah.
He is the scientific occultist, who understands the occult, but understands science and is there to combat evil.
So he's a scientist who put all his stats into esoteric knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Van Helsing is very much that.
Yeah.
But I think that, like you said, that this is the best Van Helsing.
It is. I mean, Sir Anthony Hopkins can do no wrong.
That's right.
He is.
Great actor.
Yeah, I don't know him personally. I'd love to be friends. If you hear this, reach out.
Reach out and talk
I'm on
to
Facebook.
Us. I actually do follow him on Facebook. He put some funny posts up there.
Oh, yeah? That's kind of nice. I like that.
Yeah. But it is kind of neat, you sit and you think about some of the greats in horror in the past. Karloff, Christopher Lee, and Peter. And you wonder, well, these guys are all gone. But Anthony Hopkins has done some fantastic horror.
Mm-hmm.
He's done Van Helsing.
Yeah.
He played in The Werewolf.
Yeah.
Which I don't think got the attention it deserved. Really good werewolves. Of course, played Hannibal.
Yeah. Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. So
that's again that Predator Prey
with
Van Helsing and Dracula.
Yes.
Yeah. With Clarice going to unconventional, we'll say, source.
Yes. Now, something that we have, we've never, in all three of these episodes, we haven't really talked to. We haven't talked to setting.
Yeah.
And I think that is an important thing, because you've actually been to the city.
Oh yeah.
I've never been.
I've been to Transylvania. I've been to Dracula's castle.
Yeah.
I taught English in Transylvania for a little while.
Uh-huh.
It's a gorgeous place,
right.
And the people are fantastic.
Right.
They're always very open. They're a little spooky because there's these giant churches just looming in the distance, and castles and stuff, and people are going to McDonald's, and they're just like, "Hey, how you doing?" And you're like, "This is Castlevania. I don't know what to do." Like,
you have a crucifix I can borrow.
Yeah. You know, I remember there was a lady who told me to meet her by the churchyard at sundown. I was like, no, you're not getting me. In retrospect, I probably should have seen how it played out. She was very cute. But I've been to the setting, and Transylvania is as different from England as you can get.
Yes.
Climate-wise, it's very cold. It's very remote. It's up in the mountains.
Yes.
It's even very different from the rest of Romania and Moldova.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's very isolated. Interesting fact, a lot of Dracula, and I've never been to England, but a lot of Dracula occurs in Whitby.
Yeah.
Which is in Yorkshire. Which is kind of a remote part of England.
Yeah.
It's not, and they go to London.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of it that takes place.
There's sort of seaside resort.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of remoteness. I think setting has a lot to do with Dracula.
Well, and I go back to my definition of the Gothic often. Isolation, inversion, and perversion.
Yes.
Isolation is there.
Yeah.
Dracula's castle is up on a very high cliff.
Right.
It was a defensible position.
Right.
Inversion, you see that throughout.
Yeah.
Dracula cursing God. You see, the feeding of the woman at Dracula's breast.
Yeah.
That's the inversion of the mother.
Right.
And then perversion, or the occult, speak for themselves.
Right.
You see that throughout.
And, Whitby Abbey, which is the scene of a lot of it in Whitby, I had a friend that recently visited and posted some Facebook pictures. There's like this staircase carved into the side of a mountain. And you go up the mountain, walk up this staircase, which they talk about some in the novel, and you get to this abbey that's ruined. I think it was sacked by the Vikings, so it's been in ruins for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So you don't get any more desolate than that.
Yeah.
On the Yorkshire moors.
Yeah.
So I think setting has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think so. I think when you update the setting, you've got to take that into account.
Yes.
There's something scary about horror coming home.
Yes.
Yes. Because it's easy to say, okay, that can't happen here, that happens in Transylvania.
Right.
But now it's, it's the modern era, and it's right next door. And, think about...
Dracula can hop a plane.
Yeah. Think about Fright Night.
Yeah.
Fright Night, of course, being the story of a boy whose neighbor is a vampire.
Right.
And he kind of rear windows his way into finding out.
Yeah.
Now, it's played a lot more for laughs
Right.
at times. It was the 80s, so
Yeah.
even the comedies were kind of scary.
Yeah. As long as we're mentioning 80s movies, I got to bring up Lost Boys.
Lost Boys is incredible.
It is an incredible take on the whole vampire thing because these guys, these kids, move with their single mother to this small California seaside town, and there is a gang of what they think of are toughs that are hanging out at the boardwalk. Turns out they're teenage vampires, and they lure the older one back to their hideout, feed him blood, and so he gets trapped halfway between vampire and human. And their mother is trying to date someone, and the youngest kid keeps interrupting the date because he thinks he's a vampire. Turns out the kid's right.
Yeah.
And I think that, and he is a father vampire who is looking. It's kind of and I think they make a comment about this. It's sort of a vampiric Brady Bunch.
Yeah, he's looking for a mother.
He's looking for a mother with kids.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a really
weird take on it.
And Grandpa makes it worth watching.
Yeah.
Because at the end of
the
it,
final line.
Yeah. The only thing I hate about Santa Clara is all the damn vampires.
The final line. So, I think we're going to wrap it up for today.
Yeah, let's do.
Next week, we're going to be talking about, or not next week, the week after. We're going to be talking about Amityville Horror. We'll have a special guest with us.
Yeah.
What do you got to promote, dude?
Well, of course, I always want to promote Tennessee Macabre. You can catch us on the Vortex on the Monster Channel. Just check their schedules. You can find us on Betamax all the time. We're archived there. You can find us on Vimeo. And, of course, we're on ITV Chattanooga and Otherworlds TV on Saturday nights. Go to tennessemacabre.com. You'll find links to all of our social media.
Excellent. I am always promoting Blood Oaks, my band, my passion. I also want to promote my other band, T34, which is it started as a joke, but we're taking it a lot more seriously lately.
Okay.
It's a little industrial, little doom.
Okay.
I'll play you something in a minute. But yeah, check out T34 on Bandcamp. Check out Blood Oaks on all the socials. We'll talk to you next time.
Yes. Till then.
Take care of yourselves.
Thank you for choosing the Reaper's Digest podcast. Like and subscribe. Recommend us to your friends. Check us out on all social media outlets. We'll see you next time.